Hello, we are Rosie, Alice, and Sandy. We will talk about Jane and choose some part to discuss. First part is Jane's childhood. There are many characters in the story. First is Jane, Miss Reed, Eliza, Georgiana, John, Miss Sparklehorse, Helen, and Temple. Jane was 10 years old. Her parents died because of typhus. She lived without parents. Then, Jane lived with her aunt, but her aunt treated her badly and often scolded her. And her cousin always bullied her. One day, John hit her, and she couldn't stand and hit back. Then Miss Reed locked Jane in a red room all night. The red room was cold, silent room, hardly ever used. 9 years ago, Jane's uncle, Mr. Reed, has died in this room, and since then nobody wanted to sleep in it. As Jane looked around at the dark furniture and the world in the shadows, Jane began to fear that his ghost might come back to punish Miss Reed for not keeping her promise. Jane was so frightened because she thought she saw the ghost. Later, Miss Reed decided to send Jane to local school, where the headmaster, Mr. Brocklehurst, was also cruel toward Jane. Conditions were very poor at the school. The students could not eat enough. The weather was very cold, and they did not have enough clothes to wear. There Jane met a friend named Helen, and they became best friends. In 1 year, because of serious disease, many students passed away, and so did Helen. One day, Mr. Brocklehurst visited the school. Jane was so nervous and she broke her plant. And the sound was attracted by Mr. Brocklehurst. When he discovered Jane, he asked her to stand on the chair. Then he told everyone in the public about Jane. It made her so embarrassed, and she didn't know what to do. In reality, everything he said was not true. In order to prove Jane's innocence, Miss Temple understood her story and solved this problem. After many years passed, Miss Temple left the school, and Jane decided to leave local school and started her new life.
Second part, we will talk about Mr. Rochester Hill. In this part, we have some characters. Mr. Rochester, Mistress Farfrace, Adele, Grace Poole, Lady Ingrid, Dick Mason, and Bertha Mason. Jane moved to a distant part of the country. She advertised it in a newspaper for a job as a governess. She received an answer from Mr. Farfrace, who wants a governess for a girl under 10 years old. So Jane came to Tanfield Hill, which was a large gentleman's house in the country. Jane's pupil was a girl called Adele, 7 or 8 years old, who was born in France and could hardly speak English. Luckily, Jane has learned French very well and has no difficulty in communicating with Adele. Jane still didn't know much about Mr. Rochester until now. Jane only knew that Mr. Rochester is a little peculiar and he travels a lot. Mr. Rochester was a medium height with wide shoulders and strong chest, and he has a dark face with angry-looking eyes and was about 35 years old. That was Jane's thought. One day, Jane went to another place to send a letter. On the road, a boy who rode a horse was Mr. Rochester, and there was a crash as the horse slipped and fell on the ice, bringing down its rider. In the beginning, they didn't know each other, and Jane saw that Ned needed help. Then she gave her hands, but he did not want anyone to help. They had a conversation. Therefore, Mr. Rochester knew that Jane was a governess in Turnfield. Eventually, he learned his weight on Jane's shoulders, and she helped him walk to his house. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. In Jane's mind, she saw the dark, strong face, and she still felt excited by their meeting. One day, Mr. Rochester returned to Turnfield. When Jane saw him, she immediately recognized the traveler she had helped. Mr. Rochester asked Jane some more information about her at law school. Since they knew each other, Mr. Rochester talked with Jane privately many times. Therefore, Jane was interested in Mr. Rochester, and she asked Mr. Fairfax about him. In his family, he had an older brother who died 9 years ago. Surely, he was recovered from losing his brother by now. His father was very fond of money and wanted to keep the family property together, so the elder brother inherited most of it. But Mr. Fairfax did not know what happened, and just knew the quarrel with his family because his brother died, and Mr. Rochester inherited Turnford. One day, Mr. Rochester invited Miss Ingram to Turnfield and organized a party. Many people thought that Miss Ingram would become Mr. Rochester's wife. In fact, Mr. Rochester loved Jane, and he told Jane his mind. Odd things started to happen at the house. One night, Jane was woken by a slight noise. Her curiosity and her opened the door, and she found the corridor full of smoke. She thought it was coming from Mr. Rochester. She immediately rushed into his room and shouted, "Wake up! Wake up!" Mr. Rochester woke up and went to the tub of flour and told Jane it was Grandpa who did it. Another night, Jane heard a strange voice. They said it was a servant's bell strings but James didn't believe it. After a while, Mr. Rochester came and asked James to help. James saw in his armchair like Mr. Mason, his clothes and his arms covered in blood. Then James helped him with the wood. By the next morning, Mason left. One day, James received a messenger from Gateshead. John Reed has died. Mr. Reed's health was worsening. So James decided to go back to Gateshead to visit her aunt. Her aunt was very ill. Before she died, she felt sorry for Jane, and Jane forgave her aunt. Mr. Reed died soon afterward. After Jane comes back to Turnfeld, they were preparing for Mr. Rochester's wedding. Jane thought that Mr. Rochester was going to marry Bertrand Ingram. She asked Mr. Rochester if she was leaving Turnfeld because she fell in love with Mr. Rochester and she couldn't see Mr. Rochester marry another girl. But Mr. Rochester told James that he didn't love Miss Ingram. He loved Jane, and Mr. Rochester proposed to her. Jane was so surprised and didn't believe it. Then she agreed to marry Mr. Rochester. Then they prepared their wedding, and Jane was so excited about new life. On the day of the wedding, Mr. Rochester took her church to finish their wedding process. Suddenly, the stranger destroyed the process and talked about Mr. Rochester's wife. Unfortunately, the wedding was stopped because James did not know anything. Mr. Rochester took her to see his real wife and told Jane everything which happened in the past. It made Jane so depressed and she went back to change wedding dress. Eventually, Jane chose to leave Mr. Rochester.
In this part, we talk about Moor House, and in this part, we have some character. John River, Diana River, Mary River, and Rosamond River. Jane accidentally left her bundle of possessions on the coast and was forced to sleep on the moor. She was weak and she needed some food and drink, but no one wanted to help her. Finally, Jane arrived at a long, low house, standing rather isolated in the middle of the moor. In the beginning, Hannah refused to let Jane speak to the young ladies because she thought Jane was a thief or beggar. After a while, John found Jane and brought Jane into the house. About John River, he was Diana and Mary's brother, who was the vicar in the nearby village, Morton. John was between 28 and 30, fair hair and extremely handsome. At first, John became Jane's friend, then he turned out to be her cousin. John was thoroughly practical and suppresses all of his human passion and emotions. Especially deeply, he knew that Oliver would not make a good wife.
for a missionary, so John cannot marry her. One day, John suddenly said to Jane he wanted Jane to learn Hindustani instead of German, because John will need it for his missionary work in India, and Jane could help John to learn it by studying with John. One day, John said God intended Jane to be a missionary wife. He wanted Jane to marry him and serve as his assistant on his missionary journey to India. About Diana and Mary. When Jane lived in the Moore house, she told Diana and Mary were friendly and they were best friends. Jane read the book they read, and they discussed them eagerly. Diana started teaching Jane German, and Jane helped Mary improve her drawing. They shared the same interests and opinions, and spent the day and evening very happily together. In the end, Diana and Mary were both married. About Rosamond Oliver. She was a beautiful, kindly, wealthy, and young woman. Rosamond was in love with John, but John refused to declare his love for Oliver because she wouldn't be suitable as a missionary wife. Eventually, she got engaged to Mr. Granby, and in the end of the story, Jane rejected John proposal. John achieved his ambition by going to India, a planned, and he was still unmarried. Jane met Rochester at the Ferdinand Manor. They still loved each other. Finally, they married. Jane knows what is it like to love and be loved. They are always together and have never had enough of each other's company. Miss Fairfax is retired, and Adele has grown into a charming young woman. The end.
Last part is our thought. First one, it is not simple to love or be loved. Second, age is not a problem as long as they love each other forever. The last one, in the end, Jane became friendly. She didn't any argument about life.